Welcome to Reddit Aliens. The last time you called 911, what were you calling for? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A friend of mine called me at a party at 3 a.m. while I was drunk and high. Said he wanted to end his life, but FaceTime with me before that. Went out of the building to FaceTime with him and tried to convince him of not doing it. He planned to go to a bridge and jump from there and called me when he was still at home. My friend was drunk, and I tried to convince him of just staying home, but unfortunately my convincing couldn't do that much. He said he will call me back in a few minutes to continue talking, which he did, and hung up the phone. In the meantime, I went back to the party and told the next person that I need his phone because a friend of mine tried to kill himself, and if he wanted to FaceTime me again, I would need an internet connection. He gave it to me, and I quickly called the police, telling them all the details about my friend. I've known him for 6 years by that point, but only over the internet, and they tried to find him now. The few minutes had passed, and either he called me or I called him. I cannot remember all the details. We continued to talk. He was already walking to the bridge, and I forgot his last name, so I asked him what it was, with my reasoning that I wanted to write a goodbye letter after he died, and I needed his full name for it. The name was needed for the police to identify my friend and find him sooner. I realized that I had a hard time convincing him to stay alive, so I tried my best to stall him. I would, for example, tell him to check whether his shoes were tied or do anything that would come to my mind to simply delay him in the hopes he wastes enough time and the police can find him that way. I also instructed him to do things to attract attention so a police car passing by had an easier time noticing him. Meanwhile, I called the police multiple times and gave them all the details I had on my friend, like his approximate position from what I could guess from the last minutes of conversation. Eventually, he just stopped talking out of nowhere, and I called the police again. They told me that a patrol picked him up when he was on his way to the bridge he planned to jump from, and they were bringing him to a clinic now. The operator thanked me, and I thanked her. Then I went home since it was 5 a.m. by that time. My friend is still alive today. TLDR. Friend of mine tried to commit suicide. He is still alive now. Ambulance for my stepdad this past Monday night. He was complaining of stomach or chest pain with symptoms that sounded like classic indigestion or acid reflux. Then he told me he couldn't get out of bed because the pain was so bad. He hadn't eaten, drank anything, or taken his necessary medications for over 24 hours. He has a really complicated health history, including being in remission from stage 2 esophageal cancer, so I said F it and called despite his prostentations. Turns out he had a severe bowel obstruction. He was rushed into surgery, and they discovered part of his bowel was dying. He ended up having 200 centimeters of his small bowel removed. They had him on a vent afterwards, which was really scary, but he came off it this morning and is doing well, all things considered. Woke to the sound of husband making "I'm super nauseous" sounds. Gets up and goes to the bathroom. I get my boys ready for school and hear him groaning, send them off. I walk into the bathroom and his shirt is drenched in sweat. I told him to take it off. His skin was gray. I somehow immediately knew he was having a heart attack. He's 37. When EMT arrived, they saw him and initially thought I was mistaken and said it was probably a panic attack. They perform EKG in the ambulance and confirm he's having a heart attack. Thankfully, the hospital is right down the road from us. When he got out of the cath lab, the cardiologist said that within a minute or two, went into AFib and was shocked twice. They said if he waited even 3 minutes longer, he would have been delivering different news. Know the signs. Our life got turned upside down. It wasn't me, but my grandpa. We've never called 911 before, but my mom fell asleep when he was over. Her eyes were opened and I got scared. I cried and told him. When I told him, he checked on her, and then he immediately called 911. Turns out her kidneys failed and she was hospitalized for a month, meaning I saved her life. My dad and mom split up, so if I lost her, I wouldn't have parents. This happened when I was 3 or 4. About 2 months ago, I was sitting on my couch around 2:30 in the morning, and I hear a sound no one ever wants to hear, someone trying to open my front door. I immediately went over to the door, looked through the peephole, and sure enough, there's a guy with his head resting on my door as if he's trying to hear inside. I smacked the door almost as hard as I could right where his head was resting on the other side, and as soon as he backs up, I can tell this guy is very drunk. I tell him through the door he's at the wrong place, but he just kept trying to get in. sticking his keys into the deadbolt and jiggling the door pretty rough. I keep telling him to get away from my place, but it doesn't work. This went on for about 15 minutes before I decided to call the police. I tell him the cops are coming and he leaves. About 10 minutes later, he's back and doing the same thing for about another 30 minutes. The whole time I'm talking to him, telling him he's at the wrong place and he needs to get the hell out of here. Eventually, I raise my voice nearly at the top of my lungs, at which point my neighbors start coming out because they hear me screaming, and the guy took off for good. The police arrived at 6:30 a.m. when I had already been asleep for hours. Before then, a few years ago, I was leaving my apartment and found a guy unconscious with no pants or underwear on, laying outside on the second floor of my apartment building. Mind you, it's concrete, and was about 30 degrees outside. I called the police, and they took over 2 hours to get there. I hope I don't ever actually need them urgently.
This next story is about a harrowing home invasion, and the intruder is still in the house.
Wife woke me up in the middle of the night, saying she heard someone crashing through the window in the other room and they were going through our cabinets. We get up and lock ourselves in the bathroom and call 911. Our dog is nowhere to be found, but he's probably just out there trying to make friends with an intruder. We keep hearing the cabinet doors opening and closing and zippers opening and closing for about 5 minutes until just before the police arrive. 3 police officers walk around our house and don't see any signs of forced entry, and they look through windows and don't see anyone. Dispatcher tells us to meet the officers outside, which we do. They then clear the house and no one is there and nothing is missing. The last place we could look was our bedroom closet. Open the closet door and our dog just pokes his head out, then starts wagging his tail and saying hello to the police officers. We look inside our closet and all our suitcases have been pushed over and roughly opened. That closet shares a wall with our kitchen cabinets. We figured out that our dog somehow locked himself in our pitch black closet and started panicking and trying to get out, which sounded like the cabinet slamming. Guessing he knocked over the suitcases and either started playing with them or accidentally opening them. TLDR. Our dog locked himself in a closet. Made it sound like we have an intruder. Police came. No intruder. But our dog made some friends with nice police officers. Then one of the officers gave all of us an impromptu concert on our piano at 1 a.m. Good story. Feel kinda bad we wasted the police officers' time in hindsight, but they seemed happy enough to meet our dog, LOL. My husband had a heart attack when we were in the middle of nowhere getting firewood. I had to leave him laying there, tried to move him but no way, and run to the truck to get the phone, only to realize there was no signal. The dogs were going crazy, but I got them loaded up and drove like hell till I finally got through to 911. I told her where I was and what had happened. Then I rushed back to be my dead husband's side. It took about 40 minutes from when he collapsed to when the ambulance showed up. They still tried to revive him, gave me false hope, and also a fear that if they got him back, he'd be brain dead. It was almost 2 years ago now, but feels like yesterday. Gave a dead body on the side of the road CPR. Dispatcher walked me through how to do it. I'm CPR trained, but in that moment, your memory jumps ship. I wasn't able to save the woman, but I gave her my all. Still healing and in therapy to this day.
This next story proves that truly no good deed goes unpunished.
A couple years ago, a girl locked herself in the local bar bathroom and didn't come out for a long time. I asked an employee, a female server, who told me, "Oh, yeah, she's in there, but better give my effing pills back." I alerted the bartender, who said it's none of his business, and sequestered himself in the office. I checked on the girl, and she was unresponsive on the other side of the door. No other staff could be found, so I called 911. A cop broke down the door and found the girl unresponsive. They induced vomiting then and there, took her to the hospital, and I was quickly banned for 6 months because I called 911. Find a better bummer. Gallstones. I had gastric bypass a few years ago. When you lose weight really fast, you get gallstones pretty bad. I thought I was having a heart attack, all classic symptoms. My arm went numb, I couldn't breathe, my chest felt like an elephant was sitting on me. I barely made it to my phone. Effing gallbladder. Wife's grandfather started choking while we were all eating dinner at Applebee's. I called 911. Waitress Heimlicked his ass into next week, saving his life. Found out later he molested my wife when she was young. Should have asked the waitress to stop. My dad's ex, from before he met my mom, figured out where we lived and started harassing us, breaking car windows, keying our vehicles, etc. One day my dad had enough and confronted her as she was trying to stab our dog. She attacked my dad and had the knife to his throat. I was on the phone giving the operator our address when I saw this. Ran into my parents' room, grabbed the rifle, and ran outside while still on the phone with 911. I told that crazy bitch if she didn't get away from my dad, I would kill her. She finally backed down after screaming back and forth, and then the cops arrived. I still have the occasional dream about this. I found an old man on the ground with his head bleeding. He had walked around the corner to go to the Safeway to get fruit, walked back and tripped. All I remember is the blood and fruit falling out of his pockets. His son told me he wasn't supposed to go by myself, but he didn't want to be a burden. He made a full recovery. About 7 years ago, my girlfriend, buddy of mine, and I went out to get Starbucks after church on a Sunday. We get a call from one of our other friends who was threatening suicide. The reasoning is kinda effed, but a bit of a long story. We rushed over and found her in her bed where she had downed a whole bottle of Tylenol 3. No idea if it's possible to OD on those, no. Called and didn't take long for them to show up. They pumped her stomach and she stayed in the psych ward for a few weeks. She's all good now, happily married with 2 kids. I was one of 2 people to watch a man burn alive, technically, in a major car crash. He passed me doing well over 100 as I was going like 95, I was sitting still. It was in the middle of the Tennessee wilderness at 3 a.m., about 30 miles from the nearest city, and took firefighters well over an hour to arrive on scene. I came around a corner and distinctly remember thinking, that's odd, there's a street light. We're miles from the nearest town. Then I rounded the corner and saw a massive fire in the middle of the road. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out and realized it was a car on fire in the middle of the road, the same one that had passed me. I had road flares and threw them in the middle of the road, a couple 100 yards back from the fire. Then I ran to the burning car on the phone with 911 operator and described what I saw as I saw it. I explained that I was confused because there was no driver, and I went to the passenger side and opened the door and couldn't make sense of the interior. You'd never believe how hard it is for your brain to comprehend the mess inside of a car like that until you experience it. I couldn't grasp what I was looking at, and the whole time the car is on fire, and I hear this gasping noise like air escaping from a tire. I finally realized that the mess I'm looking at in the passenger corner of the windshield is a person, and I found out later that the noise I heard was something called agonal breathing. This is a term used to describe when someone suffers severe head trauma and the brain is dead, yet the body doesn't understand and continues trying to breathe. It's a horrifying sound. At this point, the fire got so bad that I had to back off and wait for fire to arrive. While I waited, there was a secondary and tertiary crash on the opposite side of the road where the guardrail had been peeled up by the initial vehicle and landed in the middle of the road, launching vehicles into the air. By the time I finally was released from the scene by the police officers, the sun was shining through the trees, and I stopped at a Waffle House and explained to them what I had seen when asked why I looked so pale. I had a cyst rupture and fainted. My husband caught me, but not before I hit my head on the wall. I woke up and told him not to call 911. I was fine. Then threw up all over the floor and fainted again. Unsurprisingly, he called them anyway. Good man. 2 girls fighting in a Mexican restaurant over a guy. One girl takes a margarita glass and hits the other girl in the nose with it. The margarita glass hits the floor and shatters. A piece of glass hit my son's foot, who was 1 at the time. Called 911 and told them what happened, and a few minutes later an ambulance came and they cleaned my son's foot. It was a crazy night.
And this last story proves yet again that no matter how hard we try, we cannot pick our family.
My brother, his girlfriend, and her cousin decided to get drunk, smoke weed, then have some cocaine to mix in because why not? Mind you, my 2-year-old niece was also in their house. They lived next door to my mom and I. Suddenly, his girlfriend, her cousin, and my niece come over. The 2 women are saying my brother is going off on them, screaming, super violent. They are here for safety. I soon hear my brother downstairs threatening everyone. He's going to kill them all, then himself. Just full-blown ranting. I go downstairs and grab my niece and take her up with me. It's really late at night, too. I hear my mom shouting at him to go home. He needs to go sleep this off. At the moment, none of us know about the cocaine. He's known to be mean when he drinks, so we figure he drank hard liquor. Obviously, the 2 women are intoxicated too, but they're more annoying and chatty. My brother is screaming that this is his house. He is the man of the family. F everyone, everyone will die. He shoves my mom into a wall, nearly knocking her down the stairs. He broke in after being locked out. He's just not stopping. He's on a rampage. I hid in my closet, shaking, trembling, calling 911. Cops eventually show up. He talks to them outside, confesses they all just did coke. They tell him to go home and sleep it off. That's it. That's all they did. They leave, and of course he comes back inside and says, "You think the cops will stop me? This isn't the end." He eventually went home. Everyone sobered up. This was years ago, but I will never forgive him or the two women ever. He still doesn't know who called 911. I told 911 dispatch how violent he was, how threatening he was. He assaulted our mom, but, why arrest him?